Now let's begin. The morning of October 12th started like any other Thursday. Jacob Goodwin stood in his kitchen, packing lunch for his 7-year-old daughter Emma, while she finished her cereal at the table. Through the window, the Seattle rain painted everything in shades of gray. "Dad, can we go to the aquarium this weekend?" Emma asked, milk dribbling down her chin. "Maybe, sweetheart. Let me check with your mom." Jacob wiped her face with a napkin, studying her bright eyes and gap-toothed smile. She'd inherited his dark hair and her mother's delicate features, a perfect blend that made his chest tight with love every time he looked at her. His wife, Angelica, swept into the kitchen in her real estate blazer, phone already pressed to her ear. "No, Mother, I told you Friday works better," she said, barely acknowledging Jacob as she grabbed her coffee. Her tone shifted, became saccharine. "Yes, of course. Emma would love to spend the night. She adores you both." Jacob's jaw tightened. The Savages, Angelica's parents, Stuart and Faith, had become increasingly demanding of Emma's time over the past year. Every weekend, every holiday, Angelica insisted it was important for Emma to bond with her grandparents. But something about Stuart's cold eyes and Faith's thin-lipped smiles made Jacob's instincts scream. He'd grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until he aged out at 18. He'd put himself through community college working construction, then clawed his way up to project manager at a commercial development firm. He knew what unsafe felt like, and the Savage household felt unsafe. "Angel, I was thinking maybe we keep Emma home this weekend," Jacob ventured. "She's been tired lately." Angelica's eyes flashed. "My parents barely get to see her, Jacob. Don't be selfish." She ended her call and kissed Emma's head. "Grandma and Grandpa are so excited for your sleepover tomorrow, baby." Emma's smile faltered for just a moment, so brief Jacob almost missed it. "Okay, Mommy." After they left, Jacob stood in the empty kitchen, that familiar knot of unease tightening in his gut. He'd learned to trust his instincts in the foster system. They'd kept him alive more than once. But Angelica was his wife. Emma was their daughter. Surely he was just being paranoid. He didn't know then that his instincts were right. He didn't know that in less than 24 hours, his entire world would shatter. The call came at 11:47 a.m. on Friday. Jacob was reviewing blueprints for a new office complex when his phone buzzed. The school nurse. "Mr. Goodwin? This is Gloria Henderson from Riverside Elementary. Emma's grandmother picked her up about an hour ago. She said it was a family emergency." Jacob's blood went cold. "What? I didn't authorize that. Mrs. Goodwin called this morning and added her parents to the pickup list. Stuart and Faith Savage. I'm sorry, I assumed you knew." Jacob hung up and immediately called Angelica. Voicemail. He tried 3 more times. Nothing. He called the Savage house. No answer. By the time he screeched into the driveway of the Savages' sprawling Mercer Island estate at 12:30, his hands were shaking. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was silent, expensively decorated and cold as a mausoleum. "Emma." His voice echoed through the vaulted ceilings. "Emma." He found her in the basement guest room, curled on the bed in her school uniform, facing the wall. A small piece of paper was safety pinned to her pink shirt. She misbehaved. "We handled it." "Baby." Jacob knelt beside her, his voice cracking. "What happened?" Emma didn't turn, didn't speak, just kept staring at the wall, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Sweetheart, can you look at Daddy?" He gently touched her shoulder. She flinched so violently she fell off the bed. The scream that tore from her throat was pure animal terror. Jacob's construction-hardened hands were trembling as he carefully helped her sit up. That's when he saw it, the unnatural way she held her left side, how her breaths came in tiny, painful gasps. The purple bruising peeking out from her collar. "We're going to the hospital," he whispered, fighting to keep his voice calm. "Right now, baby. I've got you." She didn't speak in the car. Didn't speak when the ER nurse took her vitals. Didn't speak when they cut away her clothes, and 3 nurses simultaneously gasped. The doctor, a tired-eyed woman named Dr. Patel, pulled Jacob into the hallway. "Mr. Goodwin, your daughter has 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding in her abdominal cavity, and extensive bruising consistent with blunt force trauma. This wasn't an accident. I'm legally obligated to call Child Protective Services and the police." Jacob's knees buckled. The hallway tilted. "Who did this to her?" Dr. Patel steadied him. "We need to ask Emma." "But Mr. Goodwin, this kind of injury, someone beat your daughter with a heavy object. Probably repeatedly." When the detective arrived, a sharp-featured woman named Detective Ray Benson, Emma finally broke her silence. But not with words. Her hands were shaking too badly to write, so the nurse gave her letter blocks, the kind kindergartners use. Jacob watched his daughter's small hands arrange the blocks with painstaking care. "Grandpa, hammer." "Mom held me." The detective's expression hardened. "Your wife held her down while her father—" "That's impossible," Jacob interrupted, though his voice sounded distant to his own ears. "Angelica would never." But even as he said it, memories flooded back. Angelica's increasing coldness over the past year. Her insistence that Emma spend time with her parents. The bruise on Emma's arm last month that Angelica explained away as a playground accident. The night Emma wet the bed after returning from the Savages, and Angelica's fury. "You're embarrassing me in front of my parents." Detective Benson was already on her phone. "I'm sending units to the Savage residence now. Mr. Goodwin, I need you to stay here with Emma while we—" "No." Jacob stood, every muscle in his body coiled. "I'm going there. I'm going to. Mr. Goodwin, I understand your anger, but you need to let us handle this. If you go over there." Jacob was already out the door. The 20-minute drive to Mercer Island took 12. He barely registered running red lights, the honking horns, the rain that had turned into a downpour. All he could see were those letter blocks. "Grandpa, hammer." "Mom held me." His wife. His wife had held their daughter down while that monster. The Savage estate came into view, and Jacob's foot slammed the brake. The circular driveway was filled with police cars, lights painting the manicured lawn in alternating red and blue. Officers were everywhere. Jacob threw the car into park and jumped out, rain immediately soaking through his clothes. He made it 3 steps before 2 uniformed officers intercepted him. "Sir, you need to step back. That's my daughter they hurt." "My daughter." "Stuart Savage is in there." "Mr. Goodwin?" A new voice. Jacob turned to see an older officer approaching, hand on his belt. "I'm Sergeant Malcolm Hanna. I need you to calm down." "Calm down?" "They beat my 7-year-old daughter with a hammer. My wife held her down." Jacob's voice cracked. "I want them arrested. I want—" "Sir." Sergeant Hanna's expression was uncomfortable. "We're not here to arrest the Savages. We're here because your wife filed a restraining order against you 2 hours ago, alleging domestic violence and threatening behavior." The world stopped. "What?" "Mrs. Goodwin claims you've been increasingly violent and unstable. She has photographs of bruises, witness statements from her parents." Judge Harriet Snow granted an emergency protective order at 2:15 p.m. "You're not allowed within 500 feet of your wife, her parents, or your daughter." Jacob's mind reeled. No, my daughter is in the hospital right now with 3 broken ribs. Her grandfather." "Mr. Goodwin, you need to leave these premises immediately." Sergeant Hanna's hand moved closer to his weapon. "If you don't comply, I will arrest you for violating the restraining order." "You don't understand." "Sir, I'm asking you one more time. Leave. Now." Through the rain-streaked windows of the Savage mansion, Jacob saw movement. Stuart Savage stood in the living room window, a crystal tumbler in his hand, watching. Even from this distance, Jacob could see the smile on the old man's face. And beside him, Angelica, his wife, the woman he'd loved for 9 years. She was on her phone, but her eyes met Jacob's through the glass. There was no fear in them, no guilt, only cold satisfaction. Reality crashed over Jacob like a tsunami. This wasn't a reaction to Emma's injuries. This was planned. The early pickup from school, the note pinned to Emma's shirt, evidence they'd disciplined her, establishing a narrative. The restraining order filed before he even knew Emma was hurt. They'd set him up. Sergeant Hanna's hand was on his arm now. "Mr. Goodwin, leave." Jacob let himself be led back to his car, his mind racing. As he sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number with an attachment, a PDF of the restraining order. He opened it with shaking hands. The allegations were detailed, specific, and utterly fabricated. Incidents of explosive rage and physical intimidation going back months. A photograph of a bruise on Angelica's arm from when he grabbed her during an argument. Statements from Stuart and Faith Savage describing their increasing concern for their daughter and granddaughter's safety. The final paragraph made his blood run cold. Petitioner fears for the safety of minor child Emma Goodwin and requests full emergency custody, with respondent Jacob Goodwin, granted no visitation rights pending a full custody hearing. They weren't just setting him up. They were taking Emma. A second text came through, this one from Angelica's number. You should have let us have her, Jacob. We gave you chances. Now you'll never see her again. 72 hours later, Jacob sat in the sterile office of his court-appointed attorney, a burned-out public defender named Drew Dyer, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, Mr. Goodwin. You're in serious trouble. Dyer shuffled through papers, avoiding eye contact. The Savages have 3 affidavits from neighbors claiming they've witnessed you behaving erratically. A grocery store clerk says you got in his face last month during a dispute about a price. Your own wife has documented instances of all lies. Jacob's voice was flat. He hadn't slept in 3 days. Emma was still in the hospital, and he couldn't see her because of the restraining order. CPS had placed her in temporary foster care pending the investigation. His daughter, the one person he'd sworn to protect, was living with strangers because monsters had learned to weaponize the system. Mr. Goodwin, whether they're lies or not, they have evidence. Photographs, witnesses, documentation. What do you have? The truth. Emma told the police. A traumatized 7-year-old who's been coached by her mother and grandparents for who knows how long. Do you know what a defense attorney will do with that testimony? Dyer leaned back. Look, your best bet is to take a plea deal. Anger management classes, supervised visitation, maybe in a year or 2. No. Jacob stood. I'm not pleading to something I didn't do. And I'm not leaving my daughter with the people who beat her. Then you're going to lose everything. Dyer's voice held no sympathy. The Savages have money, connections, and a clean story. You have nothing. Jacob walked out of the office into the gray Seattle afternoon. Dyer was right about one thing. He had nothing. Except he did have something. He had 4 years in the foster system where he'd learned to read people, to see the angles they played. He had 15 years in construction where he'd learned that every structure had a weak point. He had a decade of marriage to Angelica where he'd watched her parents pull strings, call in favors, build their little empire of influence. And he had rage. White-hot, focused rage that burned away everything except one singular purpose. Destroy the people who hurt his daughter and take back what was his. Jacob pulled out his phone and made a call to someone he hadn't spoken to in 5 years. The line clicked. Leon, it's Jacob Goodwin. Remember that favor you said you owed me? I'm calling it in. Leon Hernandez looked like he'd walked out of a noir film. Weathered face, sharp eyes, and a handshake that could crush concrete. He'd been Jacob's foreman on his first major project, then started his own private investigation firm after a developer's embezzlement scheme nearly bankrupted them both. Jacob had been the one to find the evidence that saved Leon's house. Now they sat in a dim booth at a 24-hour diner in South Seattle, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. Let me get this straight, Leon said, stirring his coffee. Your wife and her parents beat your kid, then framed you for domestic violence before you could report them? That's the sanitized version. Jacob slid his phone across the table, showing the hospital photos of Emma. Leon's expression darkened. Jesus Christ. There's more. I did some digging. Stuart Savage isn't just wealthy, he's connected. City council, judges, half the police department shows up to his charity galas. Angelica's uncle is State Senator Raymond Savage. The judge who granted the restraining order? Harriet Snow. She's on the board of Stuart's foundation. Leon let out a low whistle. They own the system, which is why going through official channels won't work. Dyer already wants me to take a plea deal. Jacob's hands clenched around his coffee mug. But they made a mistake. They're so confident in their setup, they're not even trying to hide it. Stuart was smiling at me through the window while police escorted me away. Arrogance, Leon muttered. Rich people's fatal flaw. What do you need? Everything. Financial records, phone records, witnesses. There's a reason they did this now. Something that made them desperate enough to hurt Emma and risk this kind of exposure. Leon pulled out a battered notebook. I'll start with the restraining order. Those witness statements, the photographs, I'll bet money they're fabricated or coerced. The grocery store clerk thing sounds like bullshit. Who remembers a random price dispute from a month ago? Someone who got paid to remember. Exactly. I'll track him down, see if he cracks. Leon paused. Jacob, this is going to get ugly. If the Savages realize you're investigating them, they'll come after you harder. Let them. Jacob's voice was cold. They took my daughter. They beat her. There's no line they won't cross, which means there's no line I won't cross to stop them. The next morning, Jacob violated the restraining order. Not obviously, he was smarter than that. But he parked 3 blocks from Seattle Children's Hospital and waited. At 9:47 a.m., a CPS caseworker named Billy Lewis arrived, checked in at the front desk, and headed upstairs. Jacob gave her 15 minutes, then called the hospital from a burner phone Leon had provided. "Hi, I'm calling about my daughter, Emma Goodwin. I'm her father, Jacob Goodwin. I know I can't visit, but can you tell me how she's doing?" The nurse's voice was sympathetic. "Let me check. Emma's being discharged today, Mr. Goodwin. She's being released into foster care with the Peterson family." "The Petersons. Thank you." Jacob hung up and immediately called Leon. "I need you to find everything you can about a foster family named Peterson. And I need it today." By 2 p.m., Leon had sent a dossier. Mark and Kelly Peterson, a couple in their 40s who'd been foster parents for 12 years. Clean record, solid references, no red flags. Except one detail that Leon had highlighted. Kelly Peterson's maiden name was Wilkins. Her sister, Leslie Wilkins, worked as Stuart Savage's personal assistant. They placed her with people connected to the Savages. Jacob breathed, staring at his laptop screen in his empty apartment. They're not even trying to hide it. His phone rang. "Leon, I've got something." "The grocery store clerk?" "Ricky Pham." I tracked him down, leaned on him a little. Took exactly 3 minutes for him to fold. Stuart Savage's lawyer, some guy named Nathaniel Knapp, paid him $5,000 to sign an affidavit claiming you threatened him. "Did you record it?" "Every word." "But Jacob, it gets better. I pulled Knapp's phone records. Don't ask how. The day before Emma got hurt, Knapp made 6 calls to Judge Snow's personal cell. Then 3 calls to a Dr. Glenn Jackson." "Who's Jackson?" "Child psychologist. Expensive one. Testifies in custody cases." Leon's voice was grim. "I think they're building a case to say Emma's lying about what happened. Jackson will evaluate her, declare her traumatized and unreliable, coached by you. Standard playbook for rich abusers." Jacob felt the rage building again, but this time it was cold. Calculated. What else? Working on Stuart's finances, but his accounts are locked down tight. Going to take time. However, I did find something interesting. Faith Savage was admitted to Overlake Hospital 3 years ago for psychiatric evaluation. Voluntary commitment, 2 weeks. Diagnosis, delusional disorder with persecutory features. Jacob's mind raced. They're not stable. What if this isn't the first time they've hurt someone? Way ahead of you. I'm reaching out to contacts at other hospitals, other precincts. If Stuart and Faith have a history of violence, there might be records. Over the next 2 weeks, the pieces began falling into place. Leon discovered that the Petersons' foster license had been suspended twice for violations, once for leaving children unsupervised, once for failing to report a child's injury. Both suspensions were mysteriously overturned after intervention by concerned parties. Jacob tracked down Angelica's college roommate, a woman named Trisha Patrick who'd severed contact with her 15 years ago. Over coffee in Portland, Trisha told him things that made his blood run cold. Angel was never right, Trisha said, stirring sugar into her cup with shaking hands. I mean, she seemed perfect on the surface, beautiful, smart, charming. But there was something off. She'd lie about the strangest things, even when the truth would have been fine. And her parents. God, her parents. What about them? Senior year, Angel came back to the dorm after Thanksgiving with bruises on her arms. I asked what happened, and she got this weird smile and said her dad had taught her a lesson about gratitude. Like she was proud of it. Trisha's eyes were haunted. I reported it to the RA, but nothing came of it. The Savages donated a new library wing that year. Did she ever mention wanting children? Angel hated kids. Said they were messy and ruined women's bodies. I was shocked when I saw on Facebook that she'd gotten married and had a daughter. Trisha leaned forward. Why did she change her mind? That was the question that haunted Jacob. Why had Angelica, who'd been increasingly distant throughout their marriage, suddenly pushed so hard for a baby 7 years ago? Why had Stuart and Faith, who'd barely acknowledged Jacob's existence before Emma was born, become obsessed with their granddaughter? The answer came from an unexpected source, Stuart Savage's former attorney, a retired lawyer named Howard Torres who agreed to meet Jacob after Leon dropped the right names. I can't give you privileged information, Torres said in his retirement home garden, feeding koi in an ornamental pond. But I can tell you that Stuart Savage is a vindictive, controlling man who views people as possessions. When his son, Raymond, came out as gay 20 years ago, Stuart disowned him, then systematically destroyed his life. Raymond had to leave the state to escape him. I thought Raymond Savage was a senator. Different Raymond. That's Stuart's brother. Stuart's son, Raymond Jr., lives in Arizona under a different name, works as a teacher, hasn't spoken to his family in 2 decades. Torres threw more food to the koi. My point is, Stuart doesn't let go. If he's fixated on your daughter, there's a reason. And it's not love. That night, Jacob sat in his apartment surrounded by documents, photographs, and notes covering every surface. Leon's investigation, Trish's testimony, the hospital records, the financial anomalies they were starting to uncover. And then he saw it. Emma's birth certificate listed her blood type as B positive. Jacob was O positive. He'd donated blood enough times to be sure. He pulled up Angelica's medical records from her pregnancy. Leon had obtained them through methods Jacob didn't want to know about. Angelica was A positive. 2 parents with O positive and A positive blood could not have a B positive child. Jacob's hands were shaking as he cross-referenced the dates. Emma was born on March 15th, 8.5 months after he and Angelica married. Angelica had been 2 months pregnant at the wedding. She'd claimed it was a honeymoon surprise. But the fertility clinic records Leon had just pulled told a different story. Angelica had undergone IVF treatment before they married. The donor information was sealed, but the clinic's name was filed under Stuart Savage's insurance. Leon, Jacob called, his voice hollow. I need you to run a DNA test. Discreetly. On who? Emma. And Stuart Savage. 3 days later, Leon delivered the results in person, his face grim. Jacob, man, I don't know how to tell you this. Just say it. Stuart Savage is Emma's biological father. Or grandfather. The markers indicate a first-degree familial relationship, but the age differential suggests. Jacob's fist went through his laptop screen before he consciously decided to punch it. Glass and plastic exploded across the desk. Emma wasn't his daughter biologically. She was Stuart's. Which meant Angelica had either been impregnated by her own father, or, more likely, the egg and sperm had come from Stuart and Faith, making Emma technically Angelica's genetic sibling, raised as her daughter. The elaborate custody scheme suddenly made perfect, horrifying sense. They'd manufactured a child, their actual genetic offspring, and used Jacob as cover. A stable husband, a father figure to avoid suspicion. And now that Emma was old enough to potentially question or resist, they were removing Jacob from the equation entirely. They're going to take her, Jacob whispered. The custody hearing is in 3 weeks. They'll get full custody. I'll be erased from her life. And they'll have complete control over her. Not if we expose this, Leon argued. This is insane, Jacob. This is incest, fraud, child abuse. Who's going to believe it? A judge on their payroll? Police who attend their charity galas? The CPS system they've already manipulated. Jacob stood, his mind crystallizing around a single, terrible clarity. The system is their weapon. We can't beat them with it. Then what do we do? Jacob looked at the shattered laptop, at the DNA results, at the web of corruption that the Savages had spent decades building. A cold smile crossed his face, the kind of smile that would have terrified him once, before they'd taken everything from him. We burn it all down. The Peterson house sat in a quiet Bellevue suburb, all tidy lawns and neighborhood watch signs. Jacob watched from down the street in a rental car, clock ticking toward 3:15 p.m., when Emma's school bus was scheduled to drop her off. He wasn't here to grab her. He wasn't that stupid. But he needed to see her, even from a distance. Needed to know she was okay. The bus arrived. Children spilled out, laughing and shouting. And then Emma appeared, smaller than the others, holding her backpack straps like a shield. Kelly Peterson waited at the end of the driveway, waving cheerfully. Emma didn't wave back. She walked mechanically, head down, and when Kelly tried to hug her, Emma flinched. Jacob's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Even from 50 yards away, he could see it. The way Emma moved differently now, carefully, like her body was something that could betray her. The way she kept her eyes on the ground, avoiding contact. They were destroying her spirit right in front of him. His phone buzzed. A text from a new number. Surveillance confirms 3 cameras on the Peterson house. Alarm system connected to private security, not police. Backdoor lock is standard residential, easy pick. Dog is a geriatric lab, no threat. Your call. Jacob smiled grimly. He'd made a lot of calls in the past week, to people who operated outside the law's reach. Men he'd met on construction sites, women who traded in information, a whole network of people society pretended didn't exist. People who understood that sometimes the system failed, and when it did, you needed alternatives. But kidnapping Emma would make him exactly what the savages were claiming, a dangerous, unstable criminal. He needed her testimony in court, needed her safe and willing to speak. Grabbing her would undo everything. Stand down, he texted back. Not yet. Instead, Jacob drove to the courthouse. The custody hearing was set for April 8th, 13 days away, in Judge Snow's courtroom. He needed to be inside that hearing, needed to see the battlefield. What he wasn't expecting was to run into Angelica. She stood in the courthouse lobby, talking on her phone, and when she saw him, her face went through a remarkable transformation. Fear, shock, then cold calculation. She ended her call and walked toward him, making sure to stay in full view of the security cameras. Jacob, her voice was loud enough to carry. You're violating the restraining order. I should call security. I'm here to file paperwork for the custody hearing. Public courthouse, public right. Jacob kept his voice level, aware of the cameras. How's Emma? She's safe. Finally. Away from your influence. Is she? Jacob stepped closer, careful not to touch her, playing to the cameras. When I got Emma back from your parents that day, she had 3 broken ribs. Internal bleeding. The hospital has it all documented. But you already knew that, didn't you, Angel? Because you were there. You held her down. For just a moment, Angelica's mask slipped. She needed to learn discipline. She was getting willful, questioning things. My father knows how to. She caught herself, but it was too late. Jacob's jacket pocket was recording every word. Your father knows how to what? Beat children? Like he beat you in college. Jacob's voice was soft now, deadly. Like his own son Raymond had to flee the state to escape him? Tell me, Angel, when did you decide to give him another child to torture? Before or after you married me? Angelica's hand twitched toward her phone, then stopped. She was cornered and she knew it. You can't prove anything. Can't I? I have Emma's testimony. I have hospital records. I have witnesses who remember your father's previous incidents. Did you know Faith was institutionalized for delusional disorder? It's all documented. None of that matters. Angelica's voice dropped, became almost pitying. My family owns this city, Jacob. The judge, the lawyers, the social workers. We've spent 30 years building connections. You're nobody. A foster kid who got lucky, married above his station. You were always just a tool. A prop to make things look normal. I know about the DNA, Jacob said quietly. Angelica went pale. I know Emma is your genetic sister. I know you and your parents manufactured her through IVF. I know the whole sick truth. Jacob leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that the cameras wouldn't catch. And soon, everyone else will too. If you breathe a word of that, I'll destroy you, Angelica hissed. I'll claim you're delusional, that you're inventing conspiracy theories to cover your own abuse. Who do you think they'll believe? I guess we'll find out in 13 days. Jacob walked away, leaving Angelica standing in the courthouse lobby, her perfect composure cracking at the edges. That night, Leon called with news. I found Raymond Savage Jr. in Phoenix. Took some convincing, but he'll testify. Says his father tortured him for years. Broke his arm when he was 9'4", showing weakness. His mother watched and did nothing. He's got medical records, therapy notes, the works. Will he come to Seattle? He's terrified, but yeah. If it means stopping his father from doing to another kid what was done to him, he'll do it. Leon paused. Jacob, this testimony is explosive. If Raymond goes public, the Savage family's entire reputation crumbles. But they'll fight back hard. Let them fight. I'm not backing down. The pieces were moving into place. Jacob had Raymond Jr.'s testimony, the DNA evidence, hospital records, Trisha Patrick's statement, Faith's psychiatric history, and now Angelica's recorded admission. It should have been enough. But should was a dangerous word when dealing with people who own judges. On April 2nd, 6 days before the hearing, Jacob's apartment was raided by police. They found nothing. He'd made sure of that. But the message was clear. The Savages knew he was gathering ammunition, and they were trying to intimidate him into silence. On April 4th, Leon was jumped outside his office by two men who broke 3 of his ribs and left him with a message. Drop the Savage case, or next time it's your family. Leon called Jacob from the hospital. I'm not stopping, but my wife is scared. I've got kids, man. I know. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. Fuck that. These people beat a 7-year-old with a hammer. I'm seeing this through. Leon's voice was fierce despite the pain. But Jacob, they're escalating. They know we've got something big. On April 6th, Judge Snow issued an emergency order barring Raymond Savage Jr. from entering Washington state, claiming he was a hostile witness with a vendetta against the petitioner's family. No explanation of how she knew Raymond was even involved. The Savages had people everywhere. On April 7th, the day before the hearing, Jacob sat in his empty apartment and faced the truth. He was going to lose. Not because he didn't have evidence. Not because he wasn't right. But because the system was rigged, and no amount of truth could overcome 30 years of corruption and bought loyalty. His phone rang. An unknown number. Mr. Goodwin? This is Dr. Victoria McIntosh. I'm a pediatric trauma specialist at Seattle Children's Hospital. We haven't met, but I've been treating your daughter. Jacob's heart clenched. Is Emma okay? Physically, she's healing. But Mr. Goodwin, I need to tell you something, and it could cost me my job. Dr. McIntosh's voice was tight. I've been ordered by hospital administration, who received a call from the Savage family's lawyer, to revise Emma's medical report. They want me to indicate that her injuries could have been self-inflicted or accidental. That's impossible. She had blunt force trauma. I know. I wrote the original report. But administration is threatening my position if I don't comply. The Savages made a substantial donation to the hospital last year. They have leverage. Jacob closed his eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because I took an oath to do no harm. And letting those people have custody of that child would be harm. Dr. McIntosh took a shaky breath. I'm going to testify tomorrow. The real findings, not the revised version. It'll probably end my career at this hospital, but I can't stay silent. Dr. McIntosh, just make sure Emma gets justice, Mr. Goodwin. That's all I ask. After she hung up, Jacob sat in the darkness of his apartment and realized something. He wasn't alone. Dr. McIntosh, Leon, Raymond Jr., Tricia Patrick, all of them were risking everything because they recognized evil when they saw it. The Savages had money, power, and connections. But Jacob had something they'd never understood. People who gave a damn about doing the right thing. And tomorrow, in Judge Snow's courtroom, he was going to make them all count. The courtroom was smaller than Jacob expected. Cherrywood panels, fluorescent lights, and the kind of institutional carpet designed to absorb sound and hope in equal measure. Judge Harriet Snow presided from the bench like a vulture in judicial robes, her thin face set in permanent disapproval. Stuart and Faith Savage sat on the petitioner's side with Angelica between them. Stuart wore an expensive charcoal suit and the expression of a man utterly confident in his victory. Faith's hands were folded in her lap, her face serene. Angelica wouldn't meet Jacob's eyes. Their lawyer, Nathaniel Knapp, was a silver-haired shark in a 3-piece suit who smiled like he enjoyed inflicting pain. Jacob sat alone on the respondent's side. Drew Dyer had quit that morning via email. Pressure from my firm, sorry. The message was clear. The Savages had reached him. Mr. Goodwin, Judge Snow's voice dripped condescension. I see you're representing yourself. I strongly advise against. I'm aware of the risks, Your Honor. I'll proceed. Knapp stood for his opening statement, painting a picture of Jacob as an unstable, violent man whose erratic behavior endangered his own child. He showed photographs of Angelica's injuries, bruises that Jacob had never seen, never caused. He played testimony from neighbors describing shouting matches and threatening behavior. It was a masterpiece of fiction, delivered with the confidence of a man who knew the judge was already bought. Then it was Jacob's turn. Your Honor, the petitioners would have you believe I'm a danger to my daughter. But I'd like to enter into evidence Emma's medical records from her admission to Seattle Children's Hospital on October 13th. He handed copies to the bailiff, watching Judge Snow's face tighten as she scanned the pages. These records show that Emma Goodwin suffered 3 broken ribs, internal hemorrhaging, and massive blunt force trauma consistent with being struck repeatedly by a heavy object. The attending physician, Dr. Victoria McIntosh, will testify that these injuries were absolutely not accidental or self-inflicted. Knapp was on his feet. Objection. The cause of those injuries is precisely what's in question. The child fell. From what height, counselor? Off a building? Because that's what it would take to cause this kind of damage. Jacob's voice was steel. Emma told investigating officers exactly what happened. I'd like to call her to testify. Absolutely not, Judge Snow snapped. The child has been through enough trauma. I won't allow her to be subjected to this circus. Then I'd like to enter her written statement, made with letter blocks in the hospital, in the presence of Detective Ray Benson and a pediatric trauma nurse. Jacob placed the photograph on the evidence table. Grandpa. Hammer. MOM held me. The courtroom went silent. Stewart's smirk finally faltered. Your Honor. Knapp recovered quickly. This is clearly the result of coaching by the respondent. A traumatized child, influenced by a manipulative father. I wasn't allowed near her due to the restraining order, Jacob cut in. This statement was made before I even arrived at the hospital. Detective Benson can confirm I had no opportunity to coach her. Judge Snow looked like she'd bitten into something rotten. The court will take this under advisement. But Mr. Goodwin, you're making serious allegations without substantial proof. Do you have any actual witnesses? I do, Your Honor. I called Dr. Victoria McIntosh to the stand. Dr. McIntosh entered wearing her hospital credentials, her spine straight despite the looks from the Savage family. She took the oath and sat. Under Jacob's questioning, she methodically destroyed the Savage's narrative. The injuries were absolutely consistent with assault by a blunt object, a hammer. The pattern of fractures indicated repeated strikes, not an accident. Emma's terror upon physical contact suggested ongoing trauma. And no, there was absolutely no way a 7-year-old could inflict this kind of damage on herself. Dr. McIntosh, Jacob asked carefully, were you asked to alter your findings? Objection. Knapp was on his feet. Irrelevant and inflammatory. I was, Dr. McIntosh said loudly. Hospital administration, after receiving calls from the Savage family's attorney, pressured me to revise my report to indicate the injuries could have been accidental. I refused. Judge Snow's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Dr. McIntosh, you will confine yourself to answering the questions asked. I am answering the question, Your Honor. This court deserves to know that there was an attempt to suppress medical evidence that directly contradicts the petitioner's claims. The courtroom erupted. Knapp was shouting objections. Judge Snow was banging her gavel. Stuart Savage's face had gone purple with rage. In the chaos, Jacob saw his opening. Your Honor, I'd also like to introduce DNA evidence. He held up the lab results. Emma Goodwin is not my biological daughter. According to these tests, she shares first-degree familial DNA with Stuart Savage. The courtroom went dead silent. Meaning, Jacob continued into the stunned quiet, that Emma was conceived through reproductive technology using genetic material from Stuart and Faith Savage. Angelica Savage Goodwin is not Emma's biological mother. She's her genetic sister. This entire custody case is built on fraud. They manufactured a child, used me as cover to avoid suspicion, and now they're trying to remove me from the equation entirely. Knapp found his voice. This is preposterous. Your Honor, these baseless conspiracy theories. The DNA doesn't lie, counselor. And it explains why the Savages are so desperate for custody. Emma isn't their granddaughter. She's their daughter. And they'll do anything to maintain control over her, including beating her when she starts questioning her situation. Enough. Judge Snow's face was flushed. Mr. Goodwin, you're making extremely serious allegations. I have more witnesses, Your Honor. Raymond Savage Jr., Stuart's son, who was driven out of the state by his father's abuse. Tricia Patrick, Angelica's college roommate, who reported injuries to Angelica that were covered up by Savage family donations. Former employees of. The courtroom doors burst open. Detective Ray Benson entered with 4 uniformed officers and a woman in a dark suit. FBI, from the look of her credentials. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, Detective Benson said. But we have a warrant for the arrest of Stuart Savage, Faith Savage, and Angelica Goodwin on charges of child abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. The courtroom exploded again. Stuart was on his feet, shouting. Faith had gone white as a sheet. Angelica was frantically texting on her phone. Jacob stared at Detective Benson in shock. How? Dr. McIntosh's testimony just now, combined with evidence we've been gathering independently, gave us probable cause, Benson said quietly. And the FBI agent is Special Agent Monique Everett. Turns out your friend Leon Hernandez called in a federal tip about reproductive fraud and interstate custody manipulation. Once the feds started looking into the Savages' finances, they found a whole lot more than we bargained for. Agent Everett stepped forward. Your Honor, we've also issued warrants for the arrest of Nathaniel Knapp for witness tampering and evidence suppression, and we'll be investigating potential judicial corruption in this case. Judge Snow's face went from red to white. You have no authority. Actually, Your Honor, federal crimes supersede state jurisdiction. I'd advise you to cooperate fully with our investigation. Agent Everett's smile was cold. Unless you'd like to be added to our list of persons of interest. The officers moved to arrest the Savages. Stewart fought, screaming about his lawyers and his connections. Faith remained silent, but her eyes had gone vacant. She was somewhere else entirely, her mind fracturing under the weight of exposure. Angelica looked at Jacob one last time as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. You've destroyed everything, she whispered. No, Jacob said quietly. You did that when you hurt Emma. The next 3 weeks were a blur of depositions, investigations, and media coverage. The Savage family's corruption scandal made national news. Decades of buying judges, intimidating witnesses, and covering up abuse. The fertility clinic that had helped them create Emma illegally lost its license. Judge Snow resigned in disgrace. Nathaniel Knapp was disbarred and arrested. And as the investigation deepened, more victims came forward. Former employees who'd been silenced with NDAs. A cousin who disappeared from family functions after disappointing Stewart. 2 other children in private schools who showed signs of abuse. One was the child of Angelica's brother, who'd been too afraid to report. The Savage family's empire crumbled brick by brick, exposed to sunlight for the first time in 30 years. Jacob barely paid attention to any of it. His focus was on one thing, Emma. She'd been moved from the Petersons' care to a specialized foster home for trauma victims. Jacob was allowed supervised visits, twice a week, in a small room with toys and soft lighting, and a social worker who took notes. The first visit, Emma had hidden behind the social worker, refusing to look at him. The second visit, she'd sat on the opposite side of the room, silent. The third visit, she'd asked, "Are you really my dad?" Jacob had knelt down to her level, his heart breaking. Biologically, no. But Emma, I've loved you since the moment you were born. I've been your father in every way that matters. If you'll let me, I'll keep being your father. No matter what. Emma had studied him with those serious dark eyes. Grandpa said you didn't want me anymore. That you were scared of me. That was a lie, sweetheart. I've wanted you every single second. I've been fighting to get you back since the day you got hurt. You're fighting the bad people? Yes. Are you winning? Jacob had smiled through tears. I think so. But the most important thing is making sure you're safe and happy. That's all I want. Emma had taken a tiny step closer. The lady says I can choose where I go when the court stuff is done. That's right. It's your choice. Another step. Can I choose you? If that's what you want, then yes. Always yes. Emma had walked across the room and climbed into his lap, her small body still moving carefully around the healing ribs. She'd pressed her face into his shoulder and whispered, I want to go home, Daddy. Jacob had held her while she cried, had cried himself, and made a silent promise that he would spend the rest of his life making sure she never doubted her safety again. 6 months later, Jacob sat in a different courtroom for a very different hearing. This time, the judge was impartial, the social workers supportive, and the outcome wasn't in question. Mr. Goodwin, Judge Peter Glenn said warmly, I've reviewed your petition for permanent custody of Emma Goodwin, as well as the reports from her therapist, her teachers, and the social workers who've been monitoring your home. I'm pleased to say that this court finds you to be a fit and loving parent, and Emma's expressed wishes are clear. Full custody is granted. Congratulations. Jacob pulled Emma close, and she beamed up at him. A real smile this time, not the careful, frightened expression she'd worn for so long. In the gallery, Leon Hernandez gave him a thumbs up, his ribs finally healed. Dr. McIntosh smiled from her seat. She'd been hired by a better hospital that valued ethics over donations. Raymond Savage Jr. nodded from the back row. He and Jacob had become unlikely friends, bonded by survival. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting, The savage trial was still ongoing, would be for years probably. But Jacob ignored them, instead kneeling down to Emma's level. "You ready to go home, kiddo?" Emma nodded, then paused. "Dad, will the bad people ever come back?" Jacob thought about Stuart Savage, facing 20 years in federal prison for fraud, abuse, and a dozen other charges. About Faith, committed to a psychiatric facility after a complete mental breakdown. About Angelica, who'd taken a plea deal and was already serving her sentence, her perfect facade shattered forever. "No, sweetheart. They're never coming back. You're safe now. I promise." Emma took his hand, and they walked down the courthouse steps into the Seattle sunshine. Somewhere behind them, a judge was probably signing another warrant. A lawyer was probably filing another motion. The wheels of justice were grinding slowly but inevitably forward. But for Jacob Goodwin and his daughter, the daughter he'd fought heaven and hell to protect, the battle was over. They'd won. Not because the system worked, it hadn't. Not because good always triumphed over evil, it didn't. But because sometimes, when everything was at stake, ordinary people found extraordinary courage. And because a father's love for his child was a force that even corruption, money, and power couldn't break. Emma squeezed his hand. "Can we get ice cream?" Jacob laughed, the sound free and genuine for the first time in months. "We can get anything you want." As they walked toward the car, Emma looked up at him with those serious eyes that were starting to show glimpses of childhood again, of trust and hope. "I love you, Daddy." Jacob's throat tightened. "I love you too, sweetheart. Forever and always." Behind them, the courthouse doors closed on that chapter of their lives. Ahead of them stretched a future that was uncertain, probably still difficult. Healing took time, and Emma's scars went deep. But they would face it together. Father and daughter. Survivor and survivor. And that was enough. 3 years later, Jacob stood in the kitchen of their new house, a modest place in Tacoma, far from the Savages' old neighborhood, packing Emma's lunch. She was 10 now, thriving in school, still in therapy, but laughing more often than not. "Dad, did you sign my field trip form?" she called from upstairs. "On your desk," he called back. She thundered down the stairs, all elbows and knees and bright energy. The careful, frightened movements were gone. She was just a kid now, a weird, wonderful, resilient kid who loved marine biology and terrible jokes, and was probably going to rule the world someday. "Can Molly come over after school?" "Sure. Her mom already texted me." Emma paused at the door, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hey, Dad, you know how tomorrow is the anniversary of everything?" Jacob's chest tightened. 3 years since that horrible day. "Yes, sweetheart. I know. I don't want to pretend it didn't happen, but I also don't want it to be the most important thing about me anymore. Is that okay?" Jacob crossed the kitchen and hugged her. "That's more than okay. That's healthy. You get to decide what your story is, Em. Not what happened to you, what you do next." Emma squeezed him tight, then pulled back with a grin. "Then I've decided my story is about being a marine biologist who discovers a new species of octopus and names it something really cool. That sounds like a pretty great story. It's going to be awesome. Okay, I'm late. Love you." She was out the door before he could respond, a whirlwind of kid energy and determination. Jacob watched her go, his heart full. They'd both been through hell. They'd both been broken. But they'd put themselves back together, piece by piece, day by day. And they'd done it together. The Savages were gone, destroyed by their own evil, their own arrogance, their own inability to imagine that someone they'd dismissed as nobody could fight back and win. But Jacob and Emma, they were still here, still fighting, still growing, still winning. And that, Jacob thought as he grabbed his keys and headed to work, was the best revenge of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.